What are we doing today, Matthew?
We are going to be installing a Z1 front sway bar and adjustable end links on a 2008 350Z. No, the pen is not mightier than the sword.
One eternity later.
Yeah. All right, so we've got everything opened up out of the box. These are sold separately. What you get when you order the kit, the front sway bar by itself, is you get the sway bar itself and you get these two polyurethane bushings. And then the sway bar end links are sold separately. All depends on what you're doing with your suspension. If you have stock ride height, if you have coilovers or lowering springs, adjustable control arms, all of those things may vary and depend on if you want adjustable end links or not. You can run these if you have stock ride height as well because they are adjustable. So always a good recommendation to add in with your sway bar. And we're going to go ahead and jump into getting these installed. If you're doing it at home, it's a very easy installation. You can follow along with how we're going to do it step by step here, but the install manuals are also in the web listing and have the step-by-step guide there that you can print off and use as reference along with the video as well. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to need to get access to the bolts that hold the factory sway bar in place. For your factory undershroud, you're going to need to remove that to get started, so we're going to start with that. The service panel. So I've removed as much of the undershroud that I need to access the sway bar. We've got these little dust shields that are kind of in the way, so I'm just going to pop the clips out of those and temporarily get them out of the way so that we can get access to those bolts. So as far as the bolts that need to be removed to get your sway bar off, you're going to have your end links that go from your sway bar down here to your lower control arm, and then this is going to, and then you've got some bolts up here. I think these 4 should be sufficient to be able to drop it down. This is a 17 millimeter, and then these ones up here are I believe they were a 14 millimeter. Yeah, this one has a nut on the back side of it, so you need to grab something like these channel locks or a plier or another wrench to keep it from spinning on you. Okay, so that gets you your end link off. Now that we have the end links off, we're going to go ahead and remove the bracket of the sway bar itself that mounts it to the chassis of the car. And these are a 14 millimeter socket that you'll want to use there. One of them does have a stud that's coming through, so you'll need at least a deep socket on one of them. There we go. You are going to reuse these factory brackets on the front sway bar. You'll just be replacing these bushings. So make sure you remember which side you took that bracket off of. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and just kind of walk through some of the differences between these two sway bars, the factory one and the Z1. The Z1 is 4% larger. But it's also slightly lighter. If I just kind of lift here and then lift the factory one, there's a slight difference in heaviness with the factory one's definitely a little bit heavier. And then because of the 2 adjustment holes here for our sway bar, you can get up to 53% more stiff with the Z1 than the factory one. The starting position is 26% more stiff, and then the more inboard one is going to be 53% more stiff. All right, I got some energy suspension bushing grease here that we're gonna put on the polyurethane bushing on the inside and the top where it meets up with the car and makes contact there, just to make sure everything's lubricated and not gonna make a bunch of noise. I'm just gonna go ahead and spread some in here on the inside. And once you get it on here, you can kind of rotate it around. And then once I go to put the put the sway bar up and attach it, I'm gonna lubricate this top mount as well. So now we can go ahead and put the sway bar, the new sway bar on. And what I'm going to do is put these brackets kind of up in here. Get them to slide in there. And put some lubricant here where it meets up. Now, slide that out of the way. I'm gonna have to clear my oil cooler lines. Your car may or may not have those if you've added an oil cooler. All right, now I'm gonna go ahead and start to tighten these up a little bit. Tight. All right, so now that we've got the sway bar installed, I'm going to put the sway bar, the adjustable sway bar end links on. There's a couple of things to think about when you get to this point. If you are factory suspension and have stock ride height, you can just adjust these so they're the similar or the same length as the OEM ones that you took off to match those. But there's a process involved if you have lowered suspension, whether it's lowering springs or coilovers, whatever you've got set up on your car. What you don't want to do is to have these at a length where your ball joints are going to be all bound up. Because once you get so essentially what you want to do is you want to get these on and then set your length with the suspension loaded so that you're not binding anything up on the suspension that's going to cause you premature wear or the car to handle strangely. I'm going to just put the sway bar end links on, and then we're going to get the suspension loaded, and then I'll adjust from there. So just for reference, this is the factory one, and the way these came out of the box, I think they're maxed out in their shortest setting. Because my car is slightly lower but not substantially lower, I am going to match the OE1 to kind of be the baseline, or at least close to it. And then I'll go from there. With these are not side specific as I mentioned, but this adjustment nut, I don't think it matters if you have it upward or down, but I think the general consensus from the group is that it's a little bit easier to adjust if it's towards the top of the car. So if you're doing this job at home on the ground, you could just use your floor jack to do this if you have an extra one. But I'm going to use this screw jack. As I mentioned before, you don't want this when you get all of your sway bar end links lined up in the spot you want them. You can see my ball joint here is kind of at an angle. You don't want to have everything bound up when you get your sway bars installed. So I'm going to relieve some of that pressure so that I can get it up to a more level plane. Yeah, that's a good call. All right, before I tighten everything down, I am going to measure, even though I matched up those end links to what the factory ones were as far as length. Because my car is a little bit lower, we did have to use the screw jack to get one side on, because once you put one side on, it's going to kind of put a load on the other. So I'm just going to measure the eyelet to eyelet and see how different they are from each side to see what kind of adjustment I need to make. That goes to 9. But it's almost identical. All right, now that I've gotten these on, I'm going to tighten these jam nuts to make sure that they're not going to move and get out of adjustment. Let's see.
Where I tried to reach out to him, and I didn't get an email back from him yet. So I don't know.
A huge. All right, so I'm going to go ahead now that I've gotten the jam nut tight. I'm going to tighten up the nuts on the end links. They are slightly larger than the factory ones, so it's actually going to be an 18 millimeter. So there we have it. The sway bar is installed, and should be, I'm just going to go around and check the tightness on all of the other brackets that we put on. We'll put the undershroud back on, and then we can get the car down to ride height and do one more check from there as well. All right, now that we've got everything buttoned up here on that front sway bar installation, we've got the undershroud and the dust covers back on, you're gonna wanna get your car back on the ground, check your ride height, and then if you have, it wouldn't be a bad idea if you don't have access to an alignment rack to go to a shop that has an alignment rack, and just to make sure that you have your links in a good spot where you're not gonna be binding anything up. Vroom, vroom. And be sure to check out z1motorsports.com for any other parts that you would like to add to your Nissan or Infiniti from a performance or an OEM replacement perspective.